Chapter 21. Afterwards, Tyrion lay in Shay's arms, pondering his next move. Two successive hands of the king had died in office, and Tyrion could not afford to be careless. After all, their status and influence had been far greater than his own. Don't go running around, or my sister won't let you leave. This place is far too dangerous. I should never have brought you here. But you still brought me, Shay replied softly. Don't worry, I'll take good care of myself. Hearing her words, Tyrion felt slightly relieved. The next day, Tyrion took Bronn and Reed into King's Landing, not for leisure, of course, but to observe the situation among the refugees. As they entered the city, Tyrion noticed the influx of people who had flooded into the capital. Most were crammed into the slums, where they could be easily roused or manipulated by hostile forces. There's nothing we can do. That's war, Bronn remarked. Tyrion knew this well, but he feared that such a mass of desperate people might be stirred to action when Stannis attacked. Just as they were about to return to the Red Keep, Tyrion spotted a man standing on a stone, preaching to the gathered crowd. What's this? A rebellion in the making? Tyrion asked Bronn with a wry smile. Reed answered instead. They're one of the sects in the slums. Many have sprung up here. They pray to the Seven to end the war and rain down loaves of bread. At this, Tyrion's smile faded. A simple, desperate wish, he muttered, his voice heavy with unease. Let's take a closer look, he told the others. They pushed to the edge of the crowd and listened. None of this is just. We may live in humility, we may swallow our anger, but they cannot grind us into the dirt like worms. This war is a vile game, played by vile men, while we are nothing but insects beneath their feet. Look at the filth we live in, the streets filled with waste, while those in the Red Keep gorge themselves in luxury. Do you know how many gold dragons they squander on bread and milk each day? 500,000 gold dragons. Enough to fill wagons. The preacher raised his hands. Only the great sun god, Apollo, can save us. At his signal, several men carried out heavy crates. When opened, they revealed loaves of black bread. The crowd's eyes lit up with hunger. Some men rushed forward, only to be struck down where they stood by the preacher's guards. Watching calmly, the preacher, Schiller Andolf, spoke again. The sun god is merciful, but that does not mean you may act like beasts. Form an orderly line if you wish to receive bread. At this brutal sight, Tyrion narrowed his eyes and quickly withdrew with Bronn and Reed. Once clear of the slums, he muttered, there's no doubt they have powerful backing. Most likely Stannis. He has a fire priest at his side, this must be connected to him. We need to seize control of the gold cloaks immediately and stamp out this sun god cult before it spreads. Bronn gave a curt nod. Reed added, there are two great sects in the slums, the cult of the sun god, which we just witnessed, and the cult of the sparrow. The sparrow cult was much weaker, for the sun cult could distribute a little black bread to the people every 2 days. However, the sparrow cult had many members, because the rules of the sun cult were strict, and only the most devout believers could join the Knights of the Blazing Sun. What? The Knights of the Sun? Gods, they even have a knightly order. Tyrion exclaimed. Reed looked shocked. Yes, at least 50 fully armed knights. That's no secret in the slums. And their infantry? Bronn asked. Every member of the sect would dare fight the Goldcloaks with nothing but a stone. They have at least 2,000 members, not counting those who have yet to be sworn in. 7 hells, there are tens of thousands of refugees in King's Landing. If they manage to grow stronger, perhaps Stannis could retake the city from a pack of lunatics, Bronn joked. At that moment, a small group of knights suddenly appeared and rushed to surround them. Bronn and Reed immediately drew their swords, shielding Tyrion behind them. I am the hand of the king in King's Landing. Who are you? Tyrion declared at once. One knight dismounted, removed his helmet, and stepped toward Tyrion. Lord Hand, the High Septon wishes to see you. He has matters to discuss. Oh, I don't think the slums are a proper place for important discussions. Perhaps we could go to the Red Keep instead, Tyrion suggested. The knight glanced toward the imposing castle and replied, those are all your sister's people. Perhaps the slums are safer. Tyrion frowned, realizing this was no simple matter. What the knight said was curious indeed. Everyone inside the castle belonged to his sister, and the slums, oddly enough, were the safest place. In the end, Tyrion nodded and agreed to meet the High Septon in the slums. The situation was urgent, otherwise, he would still have believed the Red Keep to be the safer choice. Soon, Tyrion met the High Septon inside a crumbling house, the same man who had preached upon the stone. As Tyrion approached, the man put down his quill and said, Welcome, Lord Tyrion. The surroundings are humble, but I hope you will not mind. No, I felt the sun shining the moment I stepped inside, Tyrion replied seriously. What do you want from me? The man waved his hand, signaling the guards to withdraw. Seeing this, Tyrion also gestured for Bronn and Reed to wait outside the door. Once they were alone, the man introduced himself. My name is Schiller Andolf, Baron of the Iron Islands, and I serve under His Grace, Theon. Wait, Lord Theon, Tyrion interrupted. You're one of Theon's men. Theon, the King of the Iron Islands. Yes. His Grace sent me to tell you that we may cooperate. Gods. That fool already went to Riverrun, and now he wants to meddle in the affairs of King's Landing. Tell me, how exactly can we cooperate? The sect will provide armed forces and help you reorganize control of King's Landing. In return, you must provide us with food, weapons, and legal status. Tyrion said bluntly, food and weapons are in short supply, how about I give you status? Otherwise, forget it. Done. Schiller agreed at once. His true goal was always legal recognition. Food and weapons would be welcome, but without them, it was no great loss. After all, Tyrion was not a man easily deceived. We will also require a tract of land. This slum will do, Schiller added. Tyrion nodded. Wasn't this already yours? That won't suffice. We want a legitimate and formal charter. Chapter 22. The two then discussed some final details before Tyrion departed with his men. Once Tyrion had left, Schiller immediately wrote a letter, tied it to a raven's leg, and sent it to Riverrun, requesting support. The fine weapons looted from Riverrun could be sent back to the Iron Islands, while the worn arms could be redirected to King's Landing for secondary use, avoiding waste. Upon returning to the Red Keep, Tyrion began at once to prepare for reorganizing its garrison. He needed to secure control of King's Landing's forces as quickly as possible. He did not trust the cult of the Sun. In his eyes, Theon was an utterly treacherous villain, a man without a shred of credibility. Thus, Tyrion set his sights first on Janos Slynt, the greedy upjump knight who had been made a lord without the slightest sense of honor. Gods, who would ever raise such a man to command the capital's garrison? That evening, Tyrion summoned Janos Slynt, who arrived cheerfully, convinced that Tyrion meant to flatter him. After all, every new hand of the king who came to King's Landing always concerned himself first with the commander of the city watch. Tyrion sat at the head of the table, with Janos seated at his left. What a luxurious feast, said Janos. Though he loved coin, he was not overly fond of personal extravagance. What he enjoyed most was the feeling of piles of gold dragons stacked safely at home. Many lords, of course, hoarded dragons in their keeps, hardly an uncommon vice among the nobility. Perhaps you should try this wine. Tyrion poured him a cup. Taste it, Lord Janos. Janos took a sip and said, Arbor Isle wine, very fine indeed. Tyrion smiled. As you wish. By the way, Lord Janos, tell me, was it your order that your men turned on Stark in the throne room and captured him so suddenly? Tyrion asked. Janos was startled. It was me. He was a traitor. That was my duty. The fool probably never even realized you betrayed him simply because my sister offered you more gold, did he? Tyrion said with disdain. I have my own honor. I will not serve a traitor. Forgive me, Lord Janos, but in my opinion, you have no honor at all. Tyrion sneered. If you had the slightest sense of duty or honor, you would never have allowed Theon Greyjoy to carry off 2/3 of King's Landing's food stores. The mention of Theon Greyjoy wounded Janos's already fragile pride. He commands 6,000 men, many of them ironborn, and the king himself trusts him. That is beyond my say. Tyrion shook his head in disbelief, setting down his cup. But behind you stands the Queen Regent, Cersei Lannister. If you and my sister had the faintest respect for King's Landing, you would have stopped Theon from seizing 2/3 of the city's food. But instead, you look the other way, stripping our people of sustenance for the sake of your own grasping rights. Janos rose, indignant. Had we tried to stop Theon Greyjoy, he would have taken the city by force, and the garrison is already stretched thin. Theon Greyjoy could never have seized it by force. He is 100 times shrewder than you, greedy, ignorant, short-sighted geese that you are, Tyrion spat. Janos was no match for Tyrion in words. At the sting of Tyrion's scorn, Janos pointed furiously at him. You're drunk, dwarf. Do you think I'll sit here and let you shame me? He glared at Tyrion, as though ready to attack him at any moment. Dwarf. By the grace of the Seven, that's a dreadful insult, Lord Janos. But you will sit here and let me shame you, or else my friends will. Tyrion turned his gaze to Bronn. Janos looked at Bronn, who only smiled and nodded, making clear he would indeed handle matters. Janos's lips moved, but no words came. He knew his own worth. At last, he managed only to say coldly, I shall report tonight's events to the Queen Mother. Just you wait. Ah, but now you have broken the laws of the Seven Kingdoms. You betrayed the former hand and stand accused of taking bribes. Therefore, you are sentenced to exile upon the wall. What? Janos was stunned, unable to react at first. Guards. Tyrion barked toward the door. 2 Lannister guards entered at once, seized Janos, and had him put on a ship that very night, bound from Blackwater Bay to the wall. Watching Janos shout that he had powerful patrons, Tyrion could only sigh, thinking bitterly that all his supposed allies were fools. Slynt was, without question, a cruel man. Born low, he had clawed his way into the post of City Watch Commander through shady dealings with Petyr Baelish, out of Robert's sight. Later, during the incident in King's Landing, he had deserted to Cersei and been granted the title of Lord of Harrenhal. Yet the lordship was hollow. No power, no true lands, no loyal bannermen. Nothing but an empty title. Thus Tyrion had dismissed him on a single pretext, and there was nothing Janos could do to resist. Tyrion poured a cup of wine and handed it to Bronn. A toast to you, the new commander of the Goldcloaks, Lord Bronn. Bronn grinned as he accepted Tyrion's wine. Riverrun, the Riverlands. Theon lay atop the city wall, propping his chin with one hand as he looked down wearily at his foster brother Robb, who was still shouting insults from below. Does he never tire? Theon muttered to Ulmer Goldhand. When he turned and saw Goldhand's face twisted with fury, Theon suddenly realized how deeply these men valued honor and family. Goldhand was near to bursting. How can he speak so of you, your grace? It was his father who took you hostage, yet now he dares claim he welcomed you into his hall. 7 hells, I'll take his head myself. Theon quickly raised his hand to stop Goldhand, who was already reaching for his sword. Speaking gravely, he said, I am king of the Iron Islands. I must think of you, and of all the Ironborn. We cannot fight now. We have enough provisions to withstand a siege and wait while Tywin clashes with the Northmen. So long as we hold Riverrun, we still have a chance to retake the Riverlands and restore the glory of our ancestors. Goldhand was a man of fierce loyalty, famed even among the Ironborn for his honor. But your grace, he protested, I cannot bear to let him dishonor you so. I must kill him. Theon seized Goldhand's head in both hands and fixed him with a hard stare. Listen, Ulmer. Robb commands at least 5,000 horse. We have no more than 5,000 foot, half of them green boys who have only just seen blood. My foster brother wishes me to leave these walls and fight, so that he can reclaim Riverrun. I will never give him the chance. I will not see you risk your life for nothing. Go back to your post and stay there. Goldhand pursed his lips but said nothing more. At last, he turned away in silence. Watching him leave, Theon sighed. Goldhand's reliability and sense of honor made him invaluable. But that same devotion to glory made him reckless, too eager to fight to the death, without thought for the consequences. A fine general perhaps, but no commander. Then Theon looked down again at Robb, who still raged below, calling him villain and traitor. Theon wondered whether he could wield the same tricks he had once used to defend his family in Pike, whether he might provoke Robb into a fatal mistake at Riverrun's gates. Robb's skill in battle could not be denied. Even armed with every stratagem of the 36, Theon knew he could not match Robb in open combat. After all, Theon also understood the folly of war upon parchment. Taking up a brass warhorn, Theon shouted down to him, Brother Robb. I have already sent ravens to Lord Tywin with word of your whereabouts. If you do not return at once, Roose Bolton will be destroyed. It was true that Theon had sent a message to Tywin by raven, though no reply had come. Still, the threat alone might unsettle Robb. And unsettle him it did. Robb's face darkened. Though he had received a letter from Roose only yesterday claiming that Tywin's host had made no unusual movement, Robb dared not take the risk. His forces were stretched thin, and one ill-timed upheaval might ruin him. Chapter 23. Hey, Robb, why are you quarreling with me? After all, we are brothers. If you truly saw me as a brother, you would never have attacked Riverrun, you villain. Robb spat before storming off. He knew Theon was determined to hold the castle. Theon waved after him with a mocking grin. Farewell then, good luck. Once Robb was gone, Theon returned to Riverrun. That very day, a raven had arrived from the Iron Islands. He had not yet had the chance to read it before Robb's interruption forced him to endure the boy's tirades. Breaking the seal, Theon read the message, and a wide smile spread across his face. Yara had won sweeping victories in the Westerlands and at Ashmark. The only regret was that she had been harried all the way back by the fleet of House Ashmark, losing part of her gains. Even so, Pike now boasted over 1,000,000 golden dragons and vast stores of grain. Though not equal to the reach, the Vale, or the wealth of the Westerlands, it was far richer than the impoverished Iron Islands had ever been. Summoning Goldhand and Segovia, Theon charged them repeatedly to hold Riverrun at all costs. Then, beneath the cover of night, he set sail for the Iron Islands. He needed to return swiftly and plan the seizure of Seagard. The city had to fall before Tywin crushed Stannis. Thus, before Tywin could defeat the North, Theon meant to seize Stonehenge and bring half the Riverlands firmly under his dominion. As for whether the butterfly effect might unravel the game's threads, Theon thought Robb could not best Tywin Lannister even if he had twice his wits. Besides, Robb Stark had no calling for kingship. He had slain one of his great lords and broken his betrothal. Such rash deeds had left many northern lords deeply disillusioned. A week later, Theon reached Pike aboard a cargo vessel. Back at Pike, Yara was debating with Andrik whether she ought to march to her brother's aid. "My brother is besieged at Riverrun. You would have me sit idly at home while he suffers. Lord Theon commands 5,000 men and enough provisions for a year. The northern savages cannot besiege his grace forever. Any hasty move on our part would disrupt his grace's plans. If need arises, he has ravens to call for aid." At that moment, Theon entered from outside. "Andrik speaks wisely. It is fortunate you did not act rashly. Your grace, welcome home." Yara rose to greet Theon. Theon dropped onto a chair without ceremony. "Has the tally of spoils been taken?" Andrik bowed. "A total of 610,000 golden dragons, and vast stores of food and fine wine. The Westerlands and Ashmark are indeed rich, considering Her Highness Yara struck only Ashmark itself." "My numbers were limited," Yara admitted, "and I did not press too deep into the western border." "How fares the harvest in the north?" Theon asked. "Barely 100 craftsmen, your grace. It was troublesome to capture even that many." After hearing the reports, Theon dismissed the council and went alone to see Apollo. Passing through several lines of guards, he entered the dungeons beneath Pike. They were much larger than before, clearly expanded to house Apollo's growing form. Inside, a massive dragon lay coiled upon a mound of gold, more than 2 meters long. At the scent of his master, Apollo raised his head. Recognizing Theon, the beast beat his wings with excitement, lunged forward, and bowled him to the ground, licking him with a great rough tongue. Theon struggled helplessly. He had no more strength than any man without armor or enchantment, and could not push the dragon off. "Enough, Apollo, get up." At his command, Apollo leapt aside and began circling him with eager joy. Theon studied him in wonder. The dragon had grown quickly, his body lengthening, his wings spanning far wider than his frame. Dark gold horns curled from his head. He was, Theon admitted, a creature to stir awe even in the vainest of men. After playing with Apollo a while, Theon asked if he wished to go outside to fly, but the dragon refused. For Apollo, nothing was sweeter than dozing atop his golden hoard. Even hunting, he preferred to slip into the sea at night and fish in the depths. Sensing his beast's thoughts, Theon frowned. Perhaps, Apollo, was a poor name. A dragon like this should have been blood-red, pure and terrible. The next day, Theon convened Yara, Andrik, and the assembled nobles. "Riverrun is in our hands, but alone it means little. We must knit together the whole northwest of the Riverlands." He gestured to the map spread before them. "We must seize Seagard and Stony Sept, and take command of the Blue Fork." Andrik spoke first. "Seagard lies too near the twins, and the Freys are sworn to Robb. If we strike at Seagard now, we will surely provoke a northern counterattack." He was right. Seagard guarded the final route by which the northern host might return home. The moment word of its fall reached Robb Stark, he would hurl all his strength into reclaiming it. But Theon knew that Robb's broken betrothal would soon shatter more than hearts. It would ignite the Boltons' ambitions and inflame the Freys' wrath. To speak plainly, the North's strength for war was far weaker than it seemed. Robb was gifted in battle, and he had rarely lost against Tywin. Yet all knew that if the war dragged on, the North could not endure. Robb's rash breaking of his betrothal handed Tywin, the Boltons, and the Freys their chance. "Do not fret," Theon told them with a sly smile. "The perfect opportunity will come soon enough. Until then, keep mustering men here at Pike. All expenses will be borne by Pike itself. The lords glanced at one another uneasily. Many had hoped to carry their share of the spoils home to their halls, to enjoy their plunder in peace. Theon read their faces. My lords, do not waver. The chance is before us, the chance to claim the riverlands for our own. The greatest of the nobles hesitated, then voiced their support. Seeing this, the rest were forced to fall in line. When the gathering broke apart, Andric muttered as he watched them leave. A pack of cowards, every one. Not so, Theon replied. They have feasted well from our victories, so it is only natural they shy from greater risks. It is human nature. War, after all, devours men. Then Theon turned to him sharply. Andric, if I name you Lord of Harlaw Isle, can you keep its nobles in check? That will be no easy task, Andric admitted at once. The Harris clan is strong there. The Harris hold near 1,000 fighters, and Harlaw Isle itself is rich and fertile. Without the balance of other great houses, the Iron Islands might long ago have been ruled by them instead of House Greyjoy. I will grant you 3,000 seasoned men. With them, can you prevail? 3,000. Andric blinked, startled, until he recalled that Theon had seized thousands from King's Landing. Your Grace, I need not so many. Grant me but 1,000, and it will be enough. His own house was strong as well, a marquis family of great wick. Satisfied, Theon said, then prepare your household at once. When the Harlaw lords return, it will be too late for them to interfere. Andric bowed and departed to make his preparations. Yet he carried his own designs. Theon meant to wield him as a dagger, and Andric was content to be that blade. He planned to divide his house into 2 branches, leaving his 15-year-old half-brother Brand with a share of the old holdings. The elder retainers would remain to guide the boy, while Andric led the greater part of their strength to Harlaw Isle. The Iron Islands' power had long been stagnant. Now, for the first time in decades, there was a chance to reshape it, and Andric intended his line to rise. Later, Theon walked to a farmstead behind Pike, near Apollo's lair. There, hardy wheat of his own devising had been sown. The seed had been bred to resist blight and storm. No one could say whether its fine traits would endure beyond the first generation. Yet for now the crop ripened every 2 moons, yielding a bounty of grain and seed alike. If the qualities failed in later plantings, Theon cared little. His learning in husbandry went only so far, the most he could do was ensure that these seeds were never mixed with common stock. Perhaps in time the best might be culled and chosen for breeding anew. But for now, the realm's folk struggled merely to find bread enough to live. That future was still far off. Chapter 24. Theon was watching several farmers harvesting wheat in the fields when an old man approached him. Your Grace, you are here. This wheat is truly remarkable. It matures every 2 months, the grains are full, and it is highly resistant to disasters. Where did you find these seeds? The old man's name was Marius, a farmer. His father had been deeply knowledgeable in agriculture and passed down all his skills, making Marius a respected and well-known farmer. It was only when Theon ordered the search for skilled farmers that his lord finally took Marius seriously, cared for him properly, and eventually entrusted him to Theon. Theon waved his hand dismissively. The seeds are a gift from the drowned god. Marius, a shrewd old man, immediately realized he had asked something inappropriate. He quickly bowed his head and said, My apologies, Your Grace. I forgot that you are the messenger of the drowned god. Still, Marius looked at Theon, hesitant to speak further. What is it? Theon asked, noticing his hesitation. Your Grace, please come with me. Marius led Theon to an unharvested section of the wheat field. The wheat there had taken on a strange reddish hue. Your Grace, look. This wheat is not yet ripe, and the yield is poor. I truly don't understand why. Theon examined the field and quickly formed a suspicion. The wheat reeked of dragon dung, a pungent mix of rust and burnt ash. Do not worry. When this wheat ripens, gather workers to harvest it. Preserve it carefully and inform me at once, Theon ordered. It had to be Apollo. The dragon must have defecated here often, causing the nearby wheat to mutate. Ordinary crops would have been scorched to death by dragon dung, yet this disaster-resistant strain had survived and even undergone mutation thanks to its resilience. Whether it held any special properties was still unclear. Perhaps it did, at least it was unlikely to be fatal. Experiments could always be conducted on prisoners. Your Grace, one more thing, Marius continued. Lately, we have heard strange roars nearby at night. It might be some sort of monster. A friend claims he saw a pair of enormous eyes. Could you send more men? Please, Your Grace. Marius fell to his knees, visibly terrified. Theon looked surprised, then pointed toward a distant cave. You mean you have not seen Apollo? I thought you knew all along. Marius lifted his head, staring at the cave in confusion. There are guards posted there. We never dare approach. Then do not be afraid. The oldest creatures in this world dwell there. No monster will harm you. This is Apollo's domain. Relieved by Theon's reassurance, Marius felt his fear subside. Still, that night, when the distant roars echoed once again, everyone in the settlement trembled. As for what exactly lived inside that cave, judging by the heavy guard stationed there, Marius knew better than to be curious. Ever since his family had been sent to this fertile land, he had suspected they were part of some hidden endeavor. Now, he realized his suspicions had been correct. If these wheat seeds were spread across the land, they would inevitably draw the attention of many powers. At that moment, a guard approached. Your Grace, an envoy from King's Landing has arrived. Theon patted Marius on the shoulder and returned to the Hall of Pike with his guards. He sat back down on what could generously be called a throne, though, in truth, it was nothing more than a rough stone chair that left his back sore. What is it? Theon asked impatiently. He had no interest in idle chatter. His mind still lingered on the idea of developing a new kind of manure he had considered earlier. The hand of the king, Tyrion Lannister, intends to marry Princess Myrcella to you, my lord. This is your chance to gain the highest of honors. Theon couldn't help but sneer at the envoy's condescending tone. I'm glad you've thought of marrying me to the princess, but I don't care for your manner of speaking. We don't even know if King's Landing will survive Stannis, Yara cut in with a mocking laugh. Save yourselves first. The envoy retorted, if the capital falls, then there would be no need for a marriage alliance at all, would there? To be frank, Theon said coldly, Tywin has promised me that if I take Riverrun, Stonehenge, and Seaguard, they will be mine. Unless Lord Tywin breaks his word, you're welcome to try and take them back. Theon's meaning was plain enough. He wanted the cities, not a marriage to Myrcella. The lands north of Harrenhal, including Harrenhal itself, shall also be yours, my lord. Lord Tyrion cordially invites you to join the small council and serve as admiral of the royal fleet. Tyrion, of course, understood Theon's nature. He would do nothing without profit. That was why the imp offered him the northern riverlands outright. As for the admiralty, it was a title in name only. More likely, Tyrion intended for the Iron Fleet to be drawn into the war. What a cunning little monkey. Tell Tyrion I also want Crackclaw Point, Goldtown, and Runestone. Otherwise, there is no deal. If he agrees, send a raven. The envoy bowed and departed the hall. As the messenger left, Theon realized his plans had to change once again. He had originally intended to march on Seaguard and Stonehenge alone, but now it seemed far more likely he would have to go to King's Landing first. Yara, assemble the Iron Fleet. If Tyrion agrees, you will lead our men to take Seaguard and Stonehenge. I will also notify Tywin so that Riverrun may send troops to aid you in striking at Robb Stark. Understood. Yara immediately summoned the nobles to begin preparations. Raising the fleet was far slower than mustering men for battle, as vast stores of supplies had to be gathered. Meanwhile, Theon took quill and parchment and wrote to Tywin, asking him to alert both the Boltons and the Freys. He had heard only days earlier that Robb Stark and his queen had been wed in a quiet ceremony. To House Frey, this was nothing less than 2 stinging slaps across old Lord Walder's face, and slaps that could not be concealed. It was ironic. The Freys had grown rich collecting tolls at the Twins' Bridge, and for that, they were long despised by other lords. For years, the Freys had sought to marry into a ducal family to raise their standing among the nobility. This time, they thought they had their chance. They had even sent 4,000 men to war. 2 of Lord Walder's sons had died in the fighting. Yet Robb Stark, true to his word, broke the betrothal. Although he allowed his uncle Edmure to marry in his stead, Lord Walder held the Tullys in contempt. More importantly, Robb's actions had cost House Frey its honor. And with Riverrun already fallen to Theon, the insult was too great to ignore. To be blunt, Robb Stark was losing the war, even if it looked as though he had bested Tywin on the battlefield. The truth was, Tywin's strength had not been broken. Pinned at Riverrun, he dared not strike at Golden Tooth. Robb could not win the war by merely plundering grain from the riverlands. Once finished, Theon handed the letter to his maester and ordered him to have the ravens prepared for flight. Chapter 25. A week later, Tyrion's reply arrived. He agreed to grant Theon Crackclaw Point, but as for Runestone and Goldtown, both key ports of the Vale, he said he could not decide on his own. If Theon was willing, he could bring a fleet of at least 5,000 men to King's Landing. If not, the matter would end there. Theon studied the map. He had not expected Tyrion to yield Crackclaw Point so easily. As for Gulltown, he had asked for it as a bargaining chip, knowing full well it was unlikely to be given. Crackclaw Point belonged to the crown. Once occupied, it would give Theon control over the maritime exit from both King's Landing and the Trident. Half of the Iron Fleet could then be stationed there, allowing him to collect protection fees and amass a fortune. To be honest, mustering 5,000 men for King's Landing was already a test of the Iron Islands' mobilization. Theon commanded around 7,000 soldiers in total. 5,000 were tied up at Riverrun. 500 Iron Guards were stationed at Pikefort to keep Apollo's presence hidden. The remaining 1,500 were preparing to strike at seafront. When Balon Greyjoy had rebelled years before, he too had attempted to seize seafront first, only to be defeated beneath its walls by the local earl. The 500 Iron Guards could not be moved, so seafront would have to be abandoned for now. Theon summoned Maester Stan and ordered him not to send the letter to Tywin just yet. Originally, Theon had planned to strike Robb Stark alongside Tywin. But Robb was already doomed. The Freys and the Boltons would not fight to the death for him. The better course now was to leave Yara to garrison Riverrun while he himself sailed to King's Landing to honor his bargain. He wrote a new letter and instructed the Maester to send it to Tywin 3 days after his departure. Theon then gave Maester Stan 3 key tasks: recount the population of the Iron Islands, resurvey the land, and compile a register of all the island lords, great and small. The realm of Westeros was in chaos, and Theon had many soldiers under his command who were not native to the islands. He was already seeking the chance to purge the nobility of the Iron Islands. Soon after, Theon and Yara marched their remaining soldiers to Riverrun. Gazing up at the towering walls, Yara asked her brother what he thought of the stronghold. "There aren't many defenders left," Theon replied. "I stormed the city myself. It was only thanks to good steel and heavy armor." He was not boasting, it was the truth. Once Theon's identity was confirmed, the defenders quickly opened the gates to welcome him. Inside the hall of Riverrun, the lords of the Riverlands were assembled. Theon sat in the high seat, armored and armed, watching as the nobles argued below. Most believed Riverrun should be fortified as a base from which to subdue the Riverlands and restore the glory of the Ironborn. As for the war between the Starks and the Lannisters, they insisted it was none of their concern. It was, without doubt, the safer course. The Riverlands lay at the very heart of Westeros, bordering 5 of the 7 kingdoms. Once the Iron Fleet controlled the Trident, the heart of the Riverlands would be in Theon's grasp. Whoever emerged victorious in the wider war would still be forced to acknowledge the Iron Islands' dominion. And after such a war, with 7,000 Ironborn holding the Riverlands, no power could easily threaten them. In fact, the threat might even run the other way. But Theon's thoughts reached further. He wanted Myrcella. And he wanted the Vale. The Vale was a paradise among the 7 kingdoms. The cliffs of the Fingers were natural barriers, and the Bloody Gate was an impregnable pass. Nearly every approach was shielded by mountain or stone. Its interior was just as well defended and blessed with the most fertile lands in the realm. It was said that pumpkins from the Vale grew larger than those along the river bend. How could Theon not covet it? He had once planned to use Sansa to control the north. But without the three-eyed raven's guidance, Bran was little more than a gifted medium. That meant Bran would one day become Warden of the North, or Roose Bolton would see him and Rickon dead. Theon raised his hand to silence the squabbling nobles. When quiet fell, he made his declaration. "We will not settle for the Riverlands alone. We will take the Vale as well. If we must choose, we will forsake the Riverlands to claim the Vale. And if we can take both, then so much the better." The hall fell silent. All eyes fixed on Theon in shock. The Vale was unlike the Riverlands. It was fortified by nature itself, and it had a legitimate heir in place. To overthrow it seemed impossible. "The Princess Myrcella will wed me," Theon continued, "and I will cast down Lysa Arryn. With a royal decree from the Iron Throne, the Vale will be mine. All that remains is to root out the disobedient lords." In truth, the reason Littlefinger and Lysa had failed to secure the Vale was that Petyr Baelish was despised for his birth. He had no loyal troops, only a single writ of appointment. But Theon was different. He knew how Jon Arryn had died. He commanded real armies. He would not hesitate to rule through force. When he finished, the nobles raised no further objections. Theon's prestige had risen beyond challenge. Chapter 26. The decision was made at Riverrun. Theon led 5,000 men south toward King's Landing, while Yara commanded the remaining 1,500 to defend Riverrun. To ensure the plan went smoothly, Theon's 5,000 men marched without archers. 1,000 bowmen, along with a vast supply of arrows, were left behind at Riverrun. Theon pushed his forces hard, reaching King's Landing in just 4 days. Along the way, he encountered numerous northern scouts, proof that Robb Stark had left Tywin with many strategically placed defensive zones. Compared to the events in the original tale, when Robb invaded the Westerlands, House Lannister's situation was still relatively secure. Their only real setback had been Yara's raids. As King's Landing drew closer, Theon was struck by how quickly he had returned to the heart of the storm. On the outskirts of the city, refugees swarmed like fleas, scattered everywhere. War always drove countless souls to seek shelter in King's Landing. It wasn't just refugees. Many minor lords had also fled to the capital for safety, swelling an already overcrowded city. The slums were no safer than the roads beyond the walls. Murders, robberies, rapes, and looting were common. In such chaos, some people banded together for protection. Among these were the so-called Cult of the Sun and the Sparrow movement, both gathering strength under the guise of religion. The Knights of the Flaming Sun, part of the Cult of the Sun, now fielded 200 mounted knights and 3,000 infantrymen armed with crude spears, many tipped with wooden shafts in place of broken steel points. This force had grown formidable. Compared to the Sparrows, the Cult of the Sun was clearly wealthier. Even so, the Sparrows, recognized by the Iron Throne, commanded over 10,000 followers, ordinary men and women who had joined their cause. When Theon received Schiller's letter, he knew Tyrion would never acknowledge the Cult of the Sun alone. The imp would find a counterweight to balance the scales. The Cult of the Seven was far easier for the public to embrace than the strange sun worshippers. If the Cult of the Sun had no bread to offer, its followers would vanish. But black bread was often more convincing than lofty words. This gave the Cult of the Sun's armed forces a strength that outmatched the Sparrows, despite their smaller numbers. To Theon, any sect was dangerous. He disliked them all. Real power came from kingship, and only faith could rival a crown. Inside the Red Keep's hall, Tyrion sipped his wine to steady his nerves. The last time he had seen Theon Greyjoy, the boy had been a hostage of House Stark in the north. Now, only months later, Theon had become the man the royal family needed as an ally through marriage. The transformation was staggering. In a society where bloodlines defined worth, marrying a royal princess was the highest honor, especially with a great lion backing her claim. Lord Theon is on his way to the council chamber, Tyrion's squire announced. Tyrion set down his cup and smirked. Best not call him, Lord Theon, boy. Say, Your Majesty, or the Ironborn will cut out your tongue. Red froze, wide-eyed. Tyrion chuckled, patting his squire's side. I jest. He hasn't declared himself king yet. Theon is clever, too clever, cunning, and sly. When Tyrion entered the council chamber, Theon was already seated in the high chair, flanked by Bronn, Varys, Baelish, Pycelle, Cersei, and Myrcella. Joffrey was absent. Tyrion took the seat opposite Theon. That chair is mine. Yours is over there. What's the problem? Theon asked. Of course not, Tyrion replied smoothly, before adding with a smirk, after all, you still command 5,000 seasoned men, and countless zealots in your church. Surely you can crush Stannis. I have 5,000 men, plus the gold cloaks. Stannis won't trouble me. But first, I want your promise fulfilled. Myrcella and the Crab Claw Peninsula are mine. I demand a formal decree from the Iron Throne. Tyrion glanced at his niece, her cheeks flushed, then at Cersei, whose expression was dark and rigid. Fine. 2 days from now, there will be an official decree for all to witness. Cersei fixed Theon with a sharp glare. If Myrcella comes to harm, I swear. A Lannister always pays their debts. I understand, Theon interrupted with a smirk. His eyes lingered on Myrcella's blushing face, clearly pleased. Compared to the cruel Joffrey and the weak Tommen, Myrcella was pure, gentle, and beautiful. And in his eyes, the difference in age meant little. In the original story, Tyrion had given different answers to Varys, Baelish, and Pycelle regarding Myrcella's marriage partner. In the end, he discovered that Pycelle was loyal to Cersei and had him imprisoned in the Black Cells. But now, instead of playing that game, Tyrion had simply married Myrcella directly to Theon. Compared to Dorne, the Iron Islands were also poor, but they were far better positioned to support King's Landing. Theon, moreover, showed both courage and ambition. Since he had not yet done anything disgraceful, he became, in Tyrion's mind, the most suitable match for Myrcella. Cersei, however, despised Theon, not only for the threats he had made earlier, but also for his cunning and ruthlessness. She was certain that Myrcella would suffer under him. Yet despite her hatred, she understood that Theon's strength was essential for the defense of King's Landing. In the past 2 days, she had been teaching Myrcella what she considered a woman's greatest weapon. Men may control power, but women can control men. Unfortunately, Myrcella's gentle nature meant Cersei's lessons bore little fruit. Still, Cersei knew far more than her daughter about the ways of men and women. Royal children were forced to grow up quickly. In the original story, Theon's 4 favorite beauties were Daenerys, mother of dragons, Marjorie, the little rose, Myrcella, as gentle as water, and Ygritte, kissed by fire. Now, among them, Theon truly seemed to favor Myrcella, and, of course, the crackclaw point. Theon beckoned Myrcella forward. She glanced at her mother, then at Tyrion, before finally obeying and stepping toward him. Theon drew her close by the waist and removed the golden lion pendant from her neck. This necklace does not suit a princess as lovely as you. From his sleeve, he produced a sapphire necklace. I once thought the sea the most beautiful thing in the world. But the moment I first saw you, I knew I was wrong. Your eyes outshine the sea. Even this, terror of Poseidon, is hardly a match for you, my princess. The others in the chamber watched uneasily as Theon fastened the necklace around Myrcella's neck. Their faces betrayed their discomfort, except Cersei, who managed to keep hers composed. Tyrion broke the silence, clearly disturbed by Theon's honeyed words. He could hardly believe anyone could speak so cloyingly to a young girl. Yet the sapphire itself was undeniably beautiful, though none knew that Yara had stolen it during a raid on Lannisport. Myrcella's cheeks flushed crimson. Theon lifted her easily into his arms. From this day forward, Myrcella is my wife. You cannot take her from me. Tyrion's face hardened, though he forced a thin smile. The princess is still very young. Perhaps it would be best if she learned a little from Queen Cersei first. What do you say, Lord Theon? But Theon had no intention of letting others shape Myrcella. He wanted a royal bride who was pure and gentle, not one who whispered courtly schemes in his ear. He said nothing, but his cold stare was answer enough. The tension in the council chamber thickened, and even Bronn remained silent. At last Tyrion said, "Thank you, Lord Theon, for caring for Princess Myrcella. I trust this will not distract you from your naval affairs." He deliberately emphasized the words. Of course not. You needn't worry, Lord Tyrion, Theon replied with a smile. The council dissolved in uneasy silence. Hand in hand, Theon led Myrcella back to his quarters. He stationed his army at the Mud Gate, bringing only 100 guards with him to the Red Keep. Holding Myrcella's delicate hand, Theon marveled that a man who had lived his whole life alone could suddenly gain a wife. Thanks to his strange fate, thanks to the system, he truly relished the training fate had given him. Myrcella, sensing the council's uneasy atmosphere, followed quietly without protest. From now on, you are my wife, the noblest woman in the world, Theon promised, stroking her hair. Myrcella smiled faintly and nodded. In her heart, she knew she was only a tool for securing alliances through marriage. She hoped only that Theon would not mistreat her, she dared not hope for more. For all her composure, she was still just a girl. Theon, seeing her thoughts clearly, simply caressed her hair again and said nothing. That night, Myrcella lay beside Theon. As he idly traced shapes on her arm, she pouted. Enough games, enough games. Theon chuckled. Then let us rest. It's late. He lay down and patted the space beside him. Her cheeks reddened. She was far too young, and Cersei had warned her clearly, such things could wait until her body was ready. There were no whispered words, no acts of passion. Myrcella soon fell asleep peacefully in Theon's arms. Were it not for his unusual strength, his arm might have gone numb beneath her. Chapter 27. As the first rays of sunlight broke through the sky, the refugees in the slums began another day of struggle. Although the cult of the sun occasionally distributed black bread, their charity made little difference against the ever-growing tide of refugees. Inside the Great Sept of Baelor, Schiller and the High Sparrow debated the refugee crisis. The number of displaced had grown drastically, and judging by the current situation, riots seemed almost inevitable. Hunger had stripped away faith and obedience. Animal instinct ruled the refugees now. Schiller had even heard repeated reports of cannibalism. These were only the most obvious horrors, unspeakable tragedies plagued the slums daily. There is nothing we can do. It is plain as day, the High Sparrow said, pointing toward the slums. Those who live there are no longer men, but beasts. Give them all the food you have, and they will not thank you. They will kill you for more. Schiller did not argue. The High Sparrow's words, grim as they were, rang true. Refugees fought over scraps each day. Presenting them with plenty would only drive them into greater frenzy. Seeing Schiller's silence, the High Sparrow pressed on. Your master is here. Will you not go to him? His tone was thick with sarcasm. To him, divine power outweighed any crown, for true strength lay in the hearts of the people. That is not my master. He is the incarnation of God, Schiller replied, rising to his feet. One day, you will understand. With that, he turned and left. The High Sparrow dismissed Schiller's words. His rise to power had been swifter than in the original tale, and the hand behind it was not Cersei, but Tyrion. From his robes, he pulled out a letter from Cersei. Tyrion held command of the gold cloaks, and Cersei sought to gather an armed force of her own. Her eyes first turned toward Schiller and the Cult of the Sun. At first, she had hoped to win over both factions, but once she discovered Schiller was Theon's man, she flew into a rage and cursed his name. Left with no other option, she sought an alliance with the High Sparrow. And the Sparrow, for his part, knew that if he was to compete with the Cult of the Sun, he needed the support of High Lords, at the very least, a Lord. Thus, they struck a quick accord. As Queen Regent, Cersei offered food and political favor. In return, the High Sparrow gave her armed followers to suppress dissent. A day later, Joffrey returned to the Red Keep. Upon learning of Theon's arrival, he immediately summoned him. When Theon entered the throne room with Myrcella at his side, Joffrey sat gleefully upon the Iron Throne. I heard you chose Riverrun. Theon studied the Boyking in his splendid attire, seated upon the great throne, and could not help but sigh inwardly. Victory had been within Joffrey's grasp, yet he squandered it. Indeed, your grace. Riverrun is now ours. At this, Joffrey leapt from the throne, elated. The battle reports had been filled with defeat after defeat, but now, at last, there was good news. And not just any city, but Riverrun, the very heart of the Riverlands. Then Joffrey's gaze fell on Myrcella. I hear my uncle wed you to her. At last, he's done something useful. Theon curled his lips. Joffrey's hatred of Tyrion was notorious. In the years to come, especially after Tyrion's fall his hand, Joffrey would heap humiliation upon him without restraint. Foolish, twisted boy. Fear not, your grace. I shall take good care of the princess. Joffrey hardly cared about Myrcella's well-being. His concern was whether Theon could defend King's Landing. How many men have you brought? 5,000, your grace. All seasoned warriors. Joffrey's excitement dimmed. He had expected more. Surely after taking Riverrun, Theon should have gained at least 3,000 additional men. Theon read his thoughts at once. Your grace, 2,000 remain at Riverrun. With Riverrun held, Robb Stark will no longer be a wolf ranging south, but a stray cur without a pack. Chapter 28. 2 months passed in the blink of an eye. Even before Stannis attacked, King's Landing was already in chaos. Aside from Joffrey, who cared nothing for politics, and Theon, who was obsessed with Myrcella, Tyrion and Cersei were already at each other's throats. Tyrion controlled the garrison of King's Landing, while Cersei gave her support to the High Sparrow. With Cersei's backing, the High Sparrow's power and influence expanded rapidly. Cersei had believed the High Sparrow would be grateful, yet she soon realized he was slipping out of her control. Now stronger than ever, the High Sparrow commanded 3,000 armed men. Although their combat ability was limited, they were more than enough to enforce order within the city. Tyrion also discovered that legitimizing the faith militant, something he had personally endorsed, had not yielded the positive results he had expected. The followers of the Cult of the Sun had not grown much beyond their 3,300 adherents, focusing instead on spreading their beliefs and comforting refugees. The Sparrows, however, continued to expand their strength and even began sending envoys to contact Joffrey. Tyrion had once discussed with Theon the idea of rooting out the Sparrows entirely, but Theon refused, claiming it would only bring chaos. What a joke. When Theon returned, he intended to bring the core members of the Cult of the Sun to establish themselves in the Riverlands. At that point, as long as the Cult of the Sun's right to bear arms was revoked and they were transformed into a normal tax-paying sect, they could become a powerful tool of governance. As for the ambitious High Sparrow, let him linger in King's Landing and play his slow game with the Iron Throne. Theon, what delicious food have you made today? She asked, approaching Theon. Theon had little fondness for Westerosi cuisine and ate nothing but bread, milk, and roasted meat. So Theon often prepared dishes he remembered from elsewhere. At first, Myrcella found the foreign flavors strange, but Theon soon cultivated her taste for them. Theon himself had little to occupy his time. He usually entertained Joffrey or spent time with Myrcella. The army trained under their own officers. A group of newly recruited soldiers drilled for an hour each day, and at last, they were no longer completely disorganized. If there was one achievement from their training, it was this: the soldiers finally learned to tell left from right. This was a great improvement for ancient armies, since the ability to distinguish left from right greatly enhanced formation discipline and overall coordination. Meanwhile, Schiller was selecting elite soldiers, while 3,000 men of the infantry and 300 knights of the Blazing Sun were integrated into Theon's forces. The only problem was that the two groups clashed. After all, one followed the drowned god and the other the sun god. Theon had no choice but to station them separately. Theon placed the congee with shredded meat and fried eggs on a plate. Nothing special, as always. Myrcella leaned in and inhaled deeply. It smells so good. I wish I could eat this every day. Then she returned to the table and began setting the cutlery. As Theon put away his things, a guard entered and whispered in his ear. Your Grace, rumors are spreading through King's Landing. They say Cersei's 3 children are not Robert's trueborn heirs. Hearing this, Theon nodded calmly, his expression unchanged. He already knew. In the original drama, Stannis had spread the rumor, killing 2 birds with 1 stone, disrupting King's Landing while affirming his own rightful claim. Theon glanced at Myrcella as she ate her porridge. Myrcella was the perfect reflection of Cersei. She possessed the beauty of both Cersei and Jaime, along with the courage and kindness expected of a princess. Unfortunately, this matter would inevitably reach Myrcella's ears, though Theon hoped she could remain ignorant of it for as long as possible. After motioning for the guards to leave, Theon approached her and asked, "Is it delicious?" Myrcella swallowed, wiped her mouth, and smiled. "It's wonderful." She handed Theon another bowl. "Eat quickly, too. It won't taste as good once it's cold." Myrcella, King's Landing is in great danger, Theon said gravely. Stannis's army has begun its march. There are countless refugees here, people of many different origins. You must not leave the Red Keep. Do you understand? Myrcella nodded firmly. I understand. I won't cause trouble for you. I am your wife, your bride-to-be. Patting her head affectionately, Theon sat down to enjoy his breakfast. Good food should never go to waste. Tyrion listened to Bronn's report, breathing heavily as he sighed again and again. Only 2 days earlier, he had learned that Stannis's 30,000 soldiers were marching on King's Landing, and now the rumors concerning his brother and sister were spreading like wildfire. Damn. The impact on King's Landing was enormous. Though Tyrion had immediately dispatched men to investigate, the rumors had already taken root. This was an explosive piece of gossip, and human nature thrived on scandal. Since becoming Hand of the King, Tyrion had begun to taste the allure of power, though it came with endless burdens and political troubles. Still, the current state of King's Landing was better than he had expected. With Theon's support, the city now had more than 8,000 defenders. As for the High Sparrow, Tyrion knew him well enough to judge his character. The Zealot would never send his men to help defend the city. So long as Tyrion did not confront him directly, Stannis would not bother with the Sparrow even after seizing the capital. When the city weathered this crisis, Tyrion fully intended to eliminate the High Sparrow and then drive out Theon's cult of the Sun. Yet even without Tyrion's intervention, Theon himself had no desire to keep the cult in King's Landing. Its doctrine and mythology spoke of a creator dragon, Apollo, an invention of Theon's own design. Stannis's army had already set sail from Dragonstone and would arrive by river in less than 2 days. A defensive plan had to be made at once. Bronn, find Theon and bring him to the council chamber. Theon, who had been telling a story to Myrcella, soon joined Tyrion in the council chamber. Tyrion was surrounded by the war manuals he had gathered in King's Landing. Where do you think Stannis will attack? Tyrion asked without looking up. The Mud Gate, Theon answered immediately. Once he lands, that's the weakest point in King's Landing. Everyone knows it. Tyrion studied the map. Stannis is a seasoned commander. He will surely strike at night, either tonight or tomorrow. We received the news far too late. Theon pointed toward the waterfront on the map. You're planning to burn his dung ship with wildfire, aren't you? Tyrion shook his head in frustration. Stannis had 30,000 men, while they had barely over 10,000 to defend the Mud Gate, most of them untested and green. The two of them then discussed specific tactics and finally agreed. They would use wildfire to devastate Stannis's fleet and then rely on 10,000 men to hold King's Landing. Without adequate supplies, Stannis could not maintain a long siege. If they could only hold out until Tywin's reinforcements arrived, they might face Stannis in open battle, and win. Author's note. If you're enjoying the story and wish to support me, You can visit my p@tr30n, where you can read 50 plus extra chapters ahead. Thank you so much for your support. It means the world. Blue heart smile. p@tr30n. DylanBriak. To be continued.